Welcome back to Goosebump on the Midnight series, where the most terrifying haunted stories are told. Today, we're going to immerse ourselves in a terrifying story, a nightmare titled The Whispering Doll. It all began with an accident thought to soothe the pain of losing their first son, Kyle, and to help his wife, Mary, overcome post-traumatic depression. The young writer Victor decided to move his entire family to a remote village in the Highlands, Serene Haven. They rented an old, suspiciously cheap wooden house, hoping that the fresh air and quiet would heal all wounds. But the quiet here wasn't peaceful, it was a deadly silence, as heavy as a tomb. From the moment they arrived, they felt a cold, stagnant atmosphere and the eerie mystique of the mulberry forest with its gnarled branches like skeletal arms. While cleaning the dusty attic, Victor found a strange camphor wood chest. It was completely dust-free despite being forgotten amidst decaying belongings. Curious, he pried it open and unleashed something that should have remained locked away. Inside, there wasn't gold or jewels, but a doll dressed in a lotus pink silk. Dressed with an ivory white porcelain face, plump red lips, and notably, eyes made from dried longan seeds, black and eerily lifelike. Their young daughter, Lily, who was still grieving the loss of her brother, was immediately drawn to the doll and named it Aya. From then on, Aya became the girl's inseparable friend. But Mary, the mother, constantly felt a terrifying unease. She sensed Aya's eyes scrutinizing and judging, and its smile seemed to change, becoming more mocking. And then strange things began to happen. Objects moved on their own, whispers echoed in the night, and the climax came when Mary overheard Lily's conversation with Aya about her deceased brother, Kyle. The doll seemed to know secrets no one had ever told. Lily's drawing started featuring a faceless boy, wearing Kyle's clothes, always standing silently behind her. Victor's investigation revealed a horrifying truth from the previous owner's diary: Aya was not a toy. It was a prison, created through a dark ritual to summon the soul of an artisan's dead daughter. But what crossed the threshold was a malevolent lost child from the deep forest. They had unleashed an entity starved for affection, envious of the living, and willing to do anything to possess a body, a life. From discarding it, destroying it, to ancient exorcism rituals, all the family's efforts proved futile. The demon grew stronger, tormenting them with their own pain and guilt, possessing Mary's body and making Lily its next host. Would their family's love be strong enough to fight a centuries-old curse? Could they banish the demon from their daughter, or would they all be dragged into hell within that very house? Follow along to the end of the video to discover the breathtaking conclusion of The Whispering Doll. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us which detail haunted you the most. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next creepy stories. The scent of dampness and rotting wood assailed Victor's nostrils as he pushed open the heavy door of the house. It groaned a mournful, drawn-out creak, like the dying gasp of someone long forgotten in solitude. The air inside was stagnant, thick, and held a coldness that didn't belong to the fresh Highland air outside. Behind him, Mary gently squeezed the frail hand of their daughter, Lily, in her own cold palm. Her eyes lifelessly scanned the overgrown yard, where wild grasses grew above their knees, obscuring the stone pathway. Her gaze lingered on the empty window frames, dark as the eye sockets of a skull eroded by time. She felt as if those eye sockets were looking back at her, scrutinizing, judging. "We'll be fine," Victor said, his voice trying to force an optimistic tone, but it sounded dry and out of place in the heavy, leaden air. "Just a little cleaning, and this place will be wonderful. See, fresh air, quiet. Exactly what I need for writing, to find my inspiration again." Mary didn't answer. She just nodded mechanically, her slender shoulders trembling slightly. The quiet here wasn't the peace she longed for. It was a heavy, stifling silence, as if the entire village of Serene Haven was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. The stillness of a graveyard at midnight. They had driven their old sedan for nearly 5 hours, leaving behind the noise, dust, and painful memories of the city. They drove deeper into the misty highlands, where smooth asphalt roads gradually gave way to bumpy red dirt paths, becoming narrower with each passing mile, and sturdy houses became sparser. Serene Haven appeared before them like an old ink-wash painting, beautiful in an eerie way but heartbreakingly sad. Moss-covered, dark-tiled roofs lay silently beneath the shadow of the colossal mulberry forest, where gnarled, bare trees reached towards the sky like twisted, bony arms trying to claw at the gray sky. People said the mulberries here grew unusually well, but no one bothered to harvest them. "I don't like it here," Lily whispered, her voice tiny and weak. She buried her face in her mother's side, seeking a familiar warmth. "I miss Kyle." Mary's heart constricted, aching as if an invisible hand was squeezing it. She quickly hugged her daughter, a natural reaction to hide her paling face. Victor turned away, pretending to examine the structure of the ironwood ceiling beams, the wood grain cracked with age. That name. Kyle. It had been 6 months since that fateful accident, but the name Kyle was still an invisible, sharp knife, cutting deep into their hearts whenever it was mentioned, even unintentionally. An unfillable void, a screaming silence in their home. Because of it, because of that void, they were here. The psychologist said that a drastic change of environment could help Mary overcome severe post-traumatic depression and give the whole family a chance to start over. Victor, in his desperation after his latest manuscript was flatly rejected by 3 publishers and his credit card debts ballooned, hastily seized the opportunity to rent this house at a suspiciously cheap price. He found it through an old newspaper classified ad. The real estate agent only spoke on the phone and seemed strangely eager. A new beginning, he had told himself hundreds of times throughout the journey. But now, standing amidst this desolation and decay, he only felt that he wasn't starting, but running away. Running from the pitying glances of friends, running from familiar street corners where memories of Kyle still lingered, and most importantly, running from the gnawing guilt in his own soul. The house was much larger than they had imagined. Besides 3 bedrooms and a kitchen blackened with soot, it also had an attic that the agent had only vaguely mentioned as an old storage room, nothing remarkable. Victor was the first to climb the creaking wooden ladder, each step groaned mournfully as if about to break. The air in the attic was even worse than downstairs, a mixture of decades of accumulated dust, dried cockroach droppings, and a faint, strangely pungent camphor smell. The only light filtered in from a single round window, covered in dirt and cobwebs, casting dim streaks of light that made millions of dust particles dance in the air like a ghostly swarm of moths. Old furniture was covered with discolored, faded white cloths, forming bizarre shapes that looked like motionless ghosts sitting in silence. An old sewing machine, a wooden cradle, a few stacks of yellowed newspapers. "Dad, what's up here?" Dad?" Lily's voice echoed from downstairs, a little worried. "Just old stuff, sweetie," Victor replied, coughing a few times as the thick dust entered his throat. He was about to go back down, but something caught his eye. In the darkest corner of the room, hidden behind an old, decaying oak cabinet, was a chest. It was strangely different from the other items. It didn't have a single speck of dust on it. The chest was made of dark camphor wood, still emitting a pungent yet pleasant scent. Its entire body was exquisitely carved with floral patterns, the lines soft and strangely lifelike. On the lid was a tarnished brass lock in the shape of a perched butterfly. The curiosity of a writer, a person with a knack for research, surged, overcoming his fatigue and dejection. Victor went downstairs, rummaged through his toolbox, and pulled out a small crowbar. When he returned, Mary had brought Lily up with her. She stood at the top of the stairs, her pale face clearly anxious as she saw her husband fumbling with the strange chest. "What are you doing, Victor?" "Just seeing what's inside, honey," Victor said, wedging the crowbar into the gap between the lid and the chest. He used all his strength to pry it open. The old brass lock sprang open with a dry click, echoing in the silent attic. He slowly opened the lid of the chest. The air seemed to condense. All three held their breath. Inside, there was no gold, jewels, or precious antiques as Victor had secretly hoped. Inside, carefully lined with a layer of time-stained yellow silk, was a doll. The doll was about 40 centimeters tall, its body made of coarse cloth tightly stuffed with cotton, its limbs made of smoothly turned and polished wood. It wore a faded lotus pink silk dress, its collar and hem embroidered with tiny chrysanthemum patterns in gold thread, looking like the attire of a young noblewoman from ancient times. Its hair was made of shiny black silk threads, elaborately styled into a high bun and secured with a tiny silver hairpin. But what drew attention, what haunted, was its face. The face was painted with an ivory-white porcelain glaze, flawlessly smooth. Its cheeks had 2 streaks of faint pink, as natural as a living child's. The small, puckered lips were painted a dark red, slightly upturned in a smile that was both innocent and mysterious. And the eyes. The eyes were made of 2 dried, glossy longan seeds, perfectly varnished to the point that they shimmered in the faint light from the window. They created a terrifying illusion that they were truly alive, truly gazing deep into the beholder, reading every thought, every suffering. "My God, it's beautiful," Victor exclaimed, his voice filled with admiration. His fatigue vanished, replaced by the excitement of someone who had just discovered a treasure. A wonderful piece of craftsmanship. "Look at these lines, this expression, it must be by a talented, lost artisan." He reached out to pick it up, but Mary stopped him, her hand ice cold. "Don't, Victor. I have a bad feeling about it." Mary couldn't explain why. From the moment she looked into those black longan seed eyes, an unnamed chill ran down her spine. It wasn't the usual fear of a strange object. It was a feeling of being recognized, of being seen through, as if the inanimate doll knew all the dark secrets, the pain, the guilt she was trying to bury deep within her heart. Those eyes didn't just look, they absorbed. But Lily was different. After days of moping in silence, this was the first time the girl's big, sad eyes lit up with genuine delight. She timidly approached, slowly pulling away from her mother's hand, her eyes fixed on the doll as if hypnotized. "She's so pretty," Lily whispered, her voice clear and sweet. "Mommy, can I play with her?" Mary wanted to refuse immediately, to slam the lid shut, lock it, and throw it out of this house, out of their lives. But seeing her daughter's pleading, longing eyes, and Victor's somewhat reproachful gaze, she hesitated. The psychologist's words echoed in her ears, "Let the child find a new joy, a new connection to fill the void. She needs a friend," Victor had told her on the way. "Let her develop naturally." Mary swallowed hard. She took a step back, taking it as silent consent. Lily smiled with delight. The girl tiptoed, timidly reaching out her small hand, gently touching the lotus-pink silk dress of the doll. "I'll call her Aya," Lily said, her voice full of tenderness. "Because she looks so quiet and peaceful." Victor smiled, a relieved smile. Finally, a ray of light. He thought this was a good sign, a beginning just as he had hoped for. A new life budding in his daughter's soul, barren from grief. He had no idea that the bud he was joyfully welcoming was a deviant seed, a toxic vine. And it had just been sown in the most fertile ground on earth, a child's loneliness and a mother's pain. Aya quickly became the center of Lily's small, solitary world. The girl carried it everywhere, from her bedroom to the wild grass in the yard, clutching it tightly as if afraid someone would steal it. She placed Aya on a small chair beside the dining table, served food into a tiny bowl, and talked to it as if it were a real friend, capable of hearing and understanding. "Aya, eat your vegetables to be healthy." "Aya, how do you like our new house?" "Lily doesn't like it much, but it's fun having you here." Victor found these actions adorable. He saw it as a healthy coping mechanism for a child who had just experienced a major shock and a sudden change in environment. He even took a few photos with his phone of Lily sitting on the porch, carefully using a small comb to brush Aya's shiny black hair, intending to send them to their grandmother in the city to put her mind at ease. He saw that a smile had begun to return to his daughter's lips. Only Mary couldn't get used to it. The doll's presence in the house was like an invisible yet aching thorn in her eye. She hated the way it was always placed somewhere in plain sight, often facing her, its unblinking black eyes seemingly always following her every move, every breath. Many times, when she was alone in the living room, cleaning or simply sitting idly, she felt that the smile on the doll's lips had changed. It was no longer the mysterious, innocent smile. It had become a little wider, more mocking, as if it knew what she was thinking and was laughing at her pain. She rubbed her eyes, looked again, and it was still the same. Still the same motionless smile painted with red. She told herself she was just imagining things, that her grief and antidepressant pills were playing tricks on her mind. But then strange things began to happen. Very small things, so small that if it weren't for someone living in a state of extreme nervous tension like Mary, they would never have been noticed. One morning, Mary went into the kitchen and found the cookie box that she was sure she had left on the dining table after dinner now perched precariously on top of the refrigerator, a place Lily could never reach. When she asked, Victor just shrugged, "You must be absent-minded. You've been very forgetful lately." His unintentional words were like a knife cutting into her already fragile self-confidence. Another night, She woke up with a start at a faint rustling sound, like soft silk rubbing against rough wooden floorboards. It came from the living room. She listened, her heart pounding, but then silence filled the space again. Perhaps it was just the wind whistling through a crack in the door, or a mouse in this dilapidated old house. But the climax of her unease, the moment she knew something was truly wrong, came late one evening. Victor was fast asleep after a long day of trying to clean the garden and wrestling with blank pages in front of him. Mary couldn't sleep. Chronic insomnia plagued her. She sat on the bed, reading a book under the dim bedside lamp, but her mind couldn't focus on the words. Lily's door was slightly ajar. She heard her daughter whispering. The girl must be talking to Aya again. This habit was becoming more and more common. Mary smiled faintly, a sad smile. She intended to go in and tell her to go to sleep. As she tiptoed closer to the door, she heard more clearly. Lily's voice was clear and innocent. Aya, don't make noise, okay? Kyle is sleeping. Mary froze, her feet glued to the floor. Her whole body went cold. That's right, Lily's voice continued, completely naturally. Kyle gets startled easily. Mom used to say that. He doesn't like strange places. So we have to be very gentle, or he'll cry. A moment of silence. Mary held her breath. Her heart pounded so hard she was afraid Victor would hear and wake up. The pounding rushed in her chest, in her ears, in her throat. Then she heard Lily's voice again, but this time with a subtle change. Her voice seemed to be answering a question that Mary hadn't heard. No, Aya, Lily's voice was a little sad, as if comforting. Kyle can't play. He's too cold. Don't touch him. The air in the hallway seemed to thicken. Mary felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She knew who her daughter was talking about. But how? How could Aya know about Kyle? They had never told Lily the details of the accident, only that her brother had gone to heaven, a compassionate lie to protect the innocent girl's soul. And why? Why was Lily talking as if Kyle was right here, in this house, sleeping somewhere? She swallowed, trying to calm herself, slowly pushed the door open, and stepped in. Lily was sitting on the bed, her back to the door. Facing her, sitting on a bolster pillow, was the Aya doll. In the faint moonlight shining through the dusty window, Aya's shadow stretched long on the wall, looking larger and strangely distorted. That shadow seemed to be moving, swaying slightly. Lily? Mary called softly, her voice trembling uncontrollably. Lily jumped and turned around. Her face was a little confused. Mom! Who are you talking to, honey? Mary tried to keep her voice as normal as possible, stepping closer to the bed. I'm rocking Aya to sleep, Lily stammered, her eyes glancing at the doll. Mary stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the doll. It still looked the same. Inanimate, motionless. Shiny black hair, lotus pink silk. Dress, plump red lips, and black longan seed eyes. The smile and eyes were unchanged. Maybe she had misheard. Maybe it was just the vivid imagination of a child trying to cope with a huge loss on her own. She exhaled awkwardly, kissed her daughter's forehead. Go to sleep, sweetie. It's late. She laid Lily down, pulling the blanket up to her chest. As she turned to leave, she glanced at Aya one last time. The doll still sat proudly on the pillow. And for a brief moment, a moment she would never be sure was real or a dream, she saw the doll's head tilt slightly to one side, very gently, and its dark red lips seemed to whisper a name without a sound. Kyle. In the following days, Aya's presence began to permeate every corner of the family like a toxic root, silent and powerful. It was no longer just a doll. It was a fourth shadow in the house, a powerful silent observer, an invisible judge of all their pain and conflicts. Lily became increasingly withdrawn, almost cutting off all communication with the outside world, even with her parents. All her emotions and thoughts were conveyed through the lens of Aya. She spent hours in her room, arranging a miniature world for the doll, using scraps of fabric Victor found to sew new clothes for it, using wild flowers picked from the garden to weave tiny crowns for its head. And then, Lily began to draw. Initially, the drawing still had the innocence of a 7-year-old, the house with a red-tiled roof, green trees, a sun with slanted rays, and a smiling family of 3. But Aya was always present in every picture. The doll was drawn with haunting detail, with its lotus pink dress, high black bun, and especially its black eyes and unchanging smile. It was always drawn standing next to Lily, hand in hand. Gradually, another character appeared in the drawings. A boy. The boy never had a face, it was just a figure colored in a single hue, gray. Faint, cold. The boy always stood behind, at a distance, behind Lily and Aya, like a silent shadow observing, never participating in the fun. Sometimes, the boy was drawn sitting on a branch, sometimes hidden behind a tree trunk. Always alone. Mary found those drawings when she was cleaning her daughter's room. They were carefully hidden under Lily's pillow. Her heart clenched as she recognized the figure, hair, and even the clothes of the faceless boy. It was exactly like Kyle in their last family photo, taken just a week before the accident. She gathered the drawings, her hands trembling, and brought them to Victor, who was sitting blankly in front of his bright white computer screen. Look. Look what your daughter is drawing. She's drawing Kyle. Her voice cracked. Victor examined each drawing, his face grim. But he tried to remain calm, the calm of a man trying to be the pillar of a crumbling family. Mary, that's just her way of remembering her brother. She's a child, she doesn't know any other way to express her sadness. Maybe this is good. No. Mary shook her head wildly, tears welling up, her self-control shattering. It's that doll. It told her. It knows about Kyle. It's doing something to our daughter, Victor. Don't you see? She's alienating us, she only talks to that demon. Don't call it a demon, Mary. It's just a doll. Victor snapped, his helplessness making him irritable. You're being too sensitive. The doctor said. Don't bring the doctor into this. Mary shouted. The doctor doesn't live in this house. The doctor doesn't see its eyes. Their arguments became more frequent, bitter, and hopeless. They were like small storms, sweeping through the house, leaving a heavy silence and an ever-widening gap between them. Victor, tormented by guilt over his son's death and the pressure to be a strong pillar for his family, threw himself into work as an escape. He started driving into the center of Serene Haven village, trying to collect something clue on folklore and legends of the area. He hoped other stories would help him forget his own tragic one. The village market was small and desolate. A few vendors sat silently behind their baskets of vegetables, looking at him with the curious eyes of isolated people who had known each other for generations. Their gaze held something both unfamiliar and sympathetic. Victor stopped in front of a stall selling herbs and dried roots, emitting a pungent, earthy smell. The seller was an old woman with a face full of wrinkles, her silver hair neatly tied back. She was sitting, chewing betel nut, her lips stained dark red. That was Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r, a well-known figure in the village. "You're not from here," Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r spoke, her voice hoarse from age and betel nut, but clear and sharp. She wasn't asking, she was stating. "Yes, I just moved into the house at the edge of the mulberry forest," Victor politely replied, trying to be friendly. "I'm a writer, I came here to learn about your village's legends." Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r spat out her betel quid onto the ground. "The legends of this village aren't for outsiders. They're all sad stories. Not cheerful at all. I'm particularly interested in the stories about the lost children of the deep forest that people talk about," Victor said, trying to sound professional, like a real researcher. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.'s eyes flashed with a sharp glint. She looked at him from head to toe. "What for?" "To write books for city people to read for amusement. Those ghosts aren't a joke, Mr. Writer. They're starving. They envy the living." She paused, looking directly into Victor's eyes, her gaze seeming to penetrate him. "Especially in the house you're staying in. The house of old Mr. Liam, the doll maker. That land is dangerous. The previous owner left because he couldn't stand it either." A shiver ran down Victor's spine, even though the sun was shining brightly. "What do you mean? Who is Mr. Liam?" "Go home," Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r waved her hand, turned away, and said nothing more, continuing to chew betel nut as if he no longer existed. The old woman's vague but heavy warning sowed a seed of unease in Victor's heart that he couldn't pluck out. He returned home, determined to find out for himself. He couldn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in the truth behind rumors. He thoroughly searched the attic again, hoping to find something from the previous owner, artist Liam. This time, he searched systematically. He tapped every floorboard, checked every wall. Finally, he found a secret compartment behind an old bookshelf. Inside, there was nothing valuable, just a few old notebooks with moldy and warped leather covers. They were the diaries of artist Liam. Victor took them down to his study, closed the door tightly, and spent the entire night reading. Mr. Liam's handwriting was initially beautiful and flowing, but later became shaky and illegible, telling of a terrible personal tragedy. His only daughter, Lily, had died of smallpox when she was just 7. Overwhelmed with grief and unable to accept the truth, he had not buried his daughter. Haunted by the loss, he sought ancient dark magic he had learned from forbidden books. He performed a horrifying ritual. He created the most perfect doll of his life, Aya, and tried to summon his daughter's soul to inhabit it, so she could live again in another form, so he could be with her forever. The ritual seemed to succeed. Victor read a passage, his voice cracking with horror. I heard it laugh in the night. But that wasn't Lily's laughter. That laughter was cold and malicious. I made a terrible mistake. I opened a door, but what stepped through wasn't my daughter. It was something from the mulberry forest, a lost child that had been waiting for a very long time. It impersonated Lily, it demanded my love, but it only sowed fear and misfortune. I locked it in the camphor chest, using the very incantations I had read to seal it. May no one ever open it. The last page of the diary was torn. Victor closed the notebook, his hands trembling. His mind reeled. Mary had been right. Everything was true. The doll in his daughter's room was not a toy. It was a prison. And they, themselves, had opened that prison. While Victor confronted the horrifying truth in the old diary pages, Mary's battle grew increasingly desperate and solitary. The lost child within Aya seemed to sense the growing doubt and fear in the house, and it no longer hid itself. It began psychological torment directly and cruelly. Dreams of Kyle became more real, painfully vivid. Every night, Mary dreamed she was in a garden filled with white mist, and Kyle was there, playing on a swing. She called her son, but the boy didn't turn around. Kyle! Come back to mommy! She screamed in her dream, trying to run towards him, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The boy slowly turned. But its face was blank, without eyes, nose, or mouth, just like Lily's drawings. It extended its small, pale hand towards her. Mommy, a whispered voice echoed, not from its mouth but from everywhere in the garden. Let me play with Lily's friend. She promised to warm me up. I'm so cold, Mommy. Mary screamed and woke up with a start, her shirt drenched in sweat. But the illusions didn't end when she woke. Her reality was shattering into pieces. Sometimes, while cooking in the kitchen, she would glimpse the shadow of a child wearing Kyle's clothes darting past the door. She rushed out but found no one in the yard. Sometimes, she heard the giggling of a little boy mixed with the sound of the wind whistling through the window cracks. The laughter was clear but sent shivers down her spine. Victor, although he believed the story in the diary, still didn't know what to do about his wife's collapse. He tried to tell her what he had read, but Mary was no longer lucid enough to process it. She just shook her head, mumbling to herself, her eyes always staring at an empty corner of the room. He could only hold her, helplessly watching her waste away day by day, her eyes sunken and frantic. The conflict finally erupted on a torrential rainy afternoon, when the sky was as gray as the mood of those in the house. Mary, in a fit of extreme panic after another terrifying dream, decided she had to act on her own. She couldn't bear it anymore. She stormed into Lily's room, where the girl was sitting talking to Aya. She snatched the doll from the girl's hands. Give it to me. That freaking demon. Get out of my house. She screamed, her voice hoarse with fear and anger. No. Mommy, let Aya go. Lily wailed, trying to pull the doll back. You're hurting her. Give her back to me. The mother and daughter struggled fiercely. Aya was pulled back and forth between them. In her frenzy, Mary used all her strength to snatch the doll and retreated, intending to run out to the yard and throw it into the abandoned well. Just then, she felt her foot catch on something. She lost her balance and fell to the floor. Her head hit the edge of the wooden table with a dry thud. Blood began to trickle from the gash on her forehead, flowing in a dark red stream down her temple. As she looked up, her head swimming, the world spinning, she saw Lily standing there. But that wasn't her daughter. Lily's clear eyes were now blazing with anger, an ancient and malicious anger that didn't belong to a child. And a strange, mocking, high-pitched voice came from the girl's mouth. "I told you not to touch it." Victor had just returned home after trying to see Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r again but failing. He froze at the sight. Mary lay on the floor, blood staining her face. Lily stood there with an unfamiliar, malicious expression. And in Lily's hand, the Aya doll seemed to be smiling, a victorious smile. The toxic root had embedded itself deeply, and the monstrous plant had grown out of the ground. That fall was the last straw. The vague fear had now solidified into an iron determination in Victor's heart. He rushed to help Mary up, bandaging her wound with a clean cloth. His face no longer held any doubt, only anger, horror, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. That night, after Lily had fallen into a strangely deep sleep, they sat facing each other in the living room. Victor had locked Aya in a glass cabinet. Its longan seed eyes still stared out defiantly. "We have to throw it away," Victor said, his voice firm. "Not just throw it away, but destroy it. Burn it." "It won't leave us alone," Mary whispered, her hands still trembling, touching the bandage on her forehead. "It's already latched onto her." "Then we have to take her away from here," Victor decided. "First thing tomorrow morning. But first, I have to deal with it." Early the next morning, before dawn, while Lily was still sound asleep, Victor quietly took the doll out of the cabinet. He wrapped it in several layers of black plastic bags, taped it tightly, and took it to the car. He didn't burn it in the yard, fearing that its ashes would linger there. He drove over 30 kilometers to a desolate mountain pass on a remote road he had crossed on his way here. He stood on the rocky outcrop, looking down into the deep chasm below, where mist still hung thick. He threw the black bundle with all his might. He watched it fall, hitting the rock face, then disappearing into the dense bushes and thick mist below. He let out a sigh of relief, feeling as if a 1,000-pound burden had been lifted. The demon had been expelled. He returned home, telling Lily, when she woke up crying and looking for her friend, that Aya had gotten lost while he was cleaning the house. Lily cried all day, a resentful, mournful, heartbreaking cry. Mary and Victor, though heartbroken, told themselves it was for the best. This pain would pass, and they would start over. But the peace lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning, when Mary opened the main door to sweep, she let out a piercing scream, dropping the broom. Victor rushed out from his study. Sitting neatly on the doorstep, right on the doormat, was Aya. Its body was covered in mud, its silk dress torn and tattered, entangled with dry leaves and sharp thorns. One of its wooden arms was broken. But its ivory-white porcelain face and longan seed eyes were spotless, as if someone had carefully cleaned them. Its smile seemed even wider than before. It sat there, silently, like someone who had been away and just returned home. From that day on, real hell began. Lily suddenly fell ill. The girl had a persistent high fever, her body burning like charcoal. In her delirium, she repeatedly called out two names, Kyle. Aya. So cold. The doctor from the commune infirmary was called to examine her, but he just shook his head, unable to find a specific cause. Sore throat, viral fever, he guessed, then prescribed a few harmless antipyretics and antibiotics. But the medicine had no effect. Lily's health rapidly deteriorated. Her skin became pale, her lips cracked, her eyes sunken. She looked like a flower being drained of its life by an invisible parasite. The house was no longer a home. It became a prison, a stage for the lost child's torture. Room doors often locked themselves, trapping Mary or Victor inside for hours, despite their pounding and shouting. The giggling of a child, sometimes clear as wind chimes, sometimes grotesque and terrifying, echoed from dark corners, from the attic, from under the bed. And most frightening were the scratches. Small, sharp scratches appeared on the wooden walls, on the doors, and even on the headboard of the couple's bed. They appeared more and more each night, as if an invisible, angry small animal was trying to claw and destroy. In utter despair, as his daughter grew weaker by the day, Victor had only one last ray of hope. He drove to Grandma t.e.r.r.o's house. This time, he no longer maintained the polite demeanor of a writer seeking information. He practically knelt before the old woman, begging for help. Seeing Victor's distraught, haggard face and his unconcealed suffering, Grandma t.e.r.r.o. sighed and invited him into her home. Her house smelled strongly of herbs. She poured Victor a hot cup of root tea, then slowly began to speak. "What's in your house isn't an ordinary ghost," she said, her voice deep and clear. "It's a lost child of the deep forest. It's the souls of children who were abandoned and died of hunger and cold in this mulberry forest centuries ago. They died in resentment, in solitude. That's why they envy children with families, with love. They always seek to possess a body, a life. That foolish old Liam created a perfect conduit for them. Aya is not just a haunted doll. It's an anchor, a gateway. And now, when you tried to throw it away, it latched onto your daughter. It's trying to turn your daughter into a new vessel, so it can openly enter this world. So what should we do now?" Victor asked, his voice cracking with fear. "Burn it? Bury it?" "Useless," Grandma t.e.r.r.o. shook her head. "It's no longer completely bound to the doll. Its soul has latched onto your daughter's soul. To save the girl, there's only one way. An exorcism ritual must be performed. A very ancient and dangerous ritual, to be performed right at the source of the evil, your attic, at midnight tonight, when the yin energy is strongest." She looked deep into Victor's eyes. "This ritual requires you to face the demon within yourselves. The lost child feeds on fear, torment, suffering. The more afraid you are, the more guilty you feel, the stronger it will become. Don't you dare." Victor looked at his calloused hands, thinking of Lily's small, hot body lying on the bed, her breath growing weaker. He nodded decisively. "Even if we die, we must do it." That night, the entire house was plunged into a deadly silence, heavier than usual. The wind outside had ceased, the mulberry forest was as still as an ink painting. Victor had explained everything to Mary. She, though trembling with fear, allowed her love for her daughter to overcome everything. She nodded in agreement, her eyes gleaming with desperate determination. Precisely at 11 o'clock at night, they carried Lily, who was still delirious, up to the attic. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r was already there, setting up the ritual. A large circle was drawn with coarse salt on the wooden floor. At the four corners were 4 white candles. In the center, she placed Aya, facing a bowl of white rice and a sharp knife that had been passed over mugwort smoke, its blade gleaming coldly in the candlelight. "Sit down, both of you," she commanded, her voice firm. Inside the circle. Lay the girl between you two. Hold her hands tightly, and hold each other's hands tightly. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, absolutely do not let go, do not step out of the salt circle. It will try every way to divide you. Is that clear? Victor and Mary nodded, sitting cross-legged facing each other, their hands tightly holding Lily's small, hot hands, and their other hands holding each other. As soon as the last candle was lit, the attic door slammed shut violently, as if a whirlwind had swept through. The air in the room quickly began to grow cold. Their breaths formed misty white clouds. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r began to chant ancient incantations, warbling and melodious. The Aya doll sat motionless, but Victor and Mary could swear its longan seed eyes were glowing eerily, reflecting the flickering candlelight. Then it began. They heard frantic scratching outside the salt circle, as if dozens of small creatures were trying to break in. A whispered voice sounded in Mary's ear, her mother's voice, who had long passed away. "Mary, what are you doing? Let my grandchild go. You're hurting her. You've failed again." Mary squeezed her eyes shut, trying not to listen. But then, an illusion appeared. Before her, an image of little Kyle appeared, covered in blood as on the day of the accident, crying terribly. "Mommy, save me. It hurts so much. Why did you leave me alone? Don't you love me anymore? Kyle." Mary screamed, her heart shattering into 100 pieces. The guilt surged violently. She almost let go of Victor's hand to rush towards the illusion of her son. "Mary! That's not him. Open your eyes and look at me," Victor yelled, gripping his wife's hand even tighter, feeling her trembling. The illusion of Kyle vanished. But then it was Victor's turn. He heard the voice of the editor-in-chief who had rejected his manuscript, laughing mockingly. "What a failure you are. Can't write something better. Can't even protect your wife and children." Those words pierced his greatest insecurity, his wounded pride as a man. The room shook violently. Old objects in the attic began to float. The wooden cradle swayed creakingly. The laughter of a child echoed everywhere, growing louder, more malicious and mocking. Aya slowly began to stand up. It took stiff, clacking wooden steps towards the salt circle, its small wooden hands outstretched, as if to grab the motionless Lily. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r shouted loudly, her voice overcoming the howling wind, "It's coming out. Hold on tight. It's trying to drain the girl's life force. The lost child knew it couldn't break the circle by force. It decided to use its final and most cruel weapon, a mother's blind love. The illusion of little Kyle reappeared, but this time, he wasn't crying or blaming. He stood right behind Mary, wrapping his arms around his mother's neck. A sweet, loving voice, the voice Mary longed to hear every day, whispered into her ear. "Mommy, I'm so cold. Let me come inside with you and Lily. Just for a little while. I miss you so much." Mary opened her eyes. She saw her son, whole, as adorable as ever. Pain, love, and guilt enveloped her, blinding her. She hesitated. Just for a moment she thought she could hold both her children in her arms. A moment was more than enough. As soon as Mary's mind wavered, a crack appeared in her spiritual defense circle. A wisp of black mist from the Aneen doll shot up, rushing straight into her. Mary arched her back, letting out an inhuman scream, a scream that tore through the night. The salt circle was broken from within. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r staggered back, her old face pale with horror. "It's over." Victor only had time to push Lily behind him, shielding her with his body. Mary slowly stood up. But that was no longer Mary. Her eyes were now pitch black, with no whites. A grotesque, distorted smile stretched wide across her beautiful face. She tilted her head to one side, her neck joints cracking eerily. "Surprise?" The voice coming from her mouth was a disgusting blend of a child's clear tone and Mary's husky, low pitch. "Mother is too weak." Her feeling guilty made her to become an open door. The entity in Mary's body looked at Victor, then at Lily trembling behind him. "Now both of you will be mine. A new family. I'll be the mother, this girl will be the sister. And that boy. He'll be back soon too." It licked its lips, then grabbed a piece of broken mirror lying on the floor, advancing menacingly towards the father and daughter. Victor knew he couldn't resist by force. He could only retreat step by step, his hands still shielding Lily. He looked into his wife's black eyes, trying to find some trace of Mary, the woman he loved, within. "Mary. I know you're still in there. Fight it. For our daughter. Mary." The entity burst out laughing, a mocking, monstrous laugh. "She's crying in some dark corner in here. She's watching me do what she never dared. Punishing the daughter who stole her affection. Punishing the incompetent husband who abandoned her in her suffering." Those words were like knives stabbing into Victor's heart. They were the truth, the demons he had always faced in silence. He suddenly remembered Grandma t.e.r.r.o.'s words, "It feeds on fear, torment, suffering." The lost child wanted fear, hatred, suffering. He wouldn't give it those things. Instead of retreating, Victor stood still. He looked directly into those black eyes, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. He no longer tried to fight it. He surrendered, but not to the demon. He surrendered to his own pain. "You're right," Victor's voice was trembling but utterly sincere. "I'm a failure. I couldn't save Kyle." He choked back a sob. For the first time since the accident, he allowed himself to truly cry, without hiding it. "I'm sorry, Kyle. Daddy's so sorry." I wasn't there. I'm sorry. He looked at his wife, at the entity possessing her. Mary, I'm sorry. I was too selfish, too absorbed in my own pain, leaving you alone. I didn't listen to you. I love you, Mary. No matter what happens, no matter what you become, I still love you. That outpouring of genuine suffering and desperate love seemed to shock the entity. It froze. Mary's face twitched violently, as if two forces were tearing within. Shut up. It screamed, but its voice had weakened, no longer confident. At that chance. Now. Grandma t.e.r.r.o.r shouted, her voice hoarse. She lunged forward, grabbed the enchanted knife, and plunged it directly into the heart of Aya, the doll lying motionless on the floor. A piercing scream tore through the air, an inhuman shriek of pain and rage, emanating from the doll and from Mary's mouth simultaneously. The Aya doll convulsed wildly. A plume of thick black smoke rose from the stab wound on its chest, and then, it burst into flames. An eerie, greenish fire flared violently, incinerating the doll to ashes in just a few short seconds. At the same moment, Mary collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The black mist around her dissipated. The room fell silent again. The wind stopped blowing. The 4 candles snuffed out. Only the acrid smell of ashes and a heavy, suffocating silence remained. Victor rushed to his wife, embracing her. On the floor, little Lily slowly opened her eyes. The fever had subsided. She looked around the room confusedly. Dad. Mom. What happened? They didn't stay another night. Till the dawn, Victor packed the most essential items into their old car. He carried Mary, who was still very weak, into the car. Lily, her face still bewildered, sat in the back seat, seemingly remembering nothing of the nightmare that had passed. Without a word of farewell, they left Serene Haven village, leaving behind the haunted wooden house and the gloomy mulberry forest. As the car disappeared behind the mountain range, the sun rose, casting its first rays down on the village, but it seemed unable to dispel the dark shadow that had haunted this place for centuries. 8 years is a long enough time to fade scars, for screams to subside into silence, and for memories to solidify into a benign tumor in the mind. Victor's family tried to believe that. They had fled the wooden house and the mulberry forest, plunging into the noisy, anonymous embrace of the city, hoping that the crowds and neon lights would dispel the past haunting them. They lived in an apartment on the 12th floor of an old apartment building, where the hallway always reeked of mixed cuisines and the sounds of hundreds of other families talking, laughing, arguing, and crying echoed through the thin walls. Privacy was a luxury, and that itself gave Victor and Mary a false sense of security in the early years. Haunting ghost, they told themselves, needed silence and space to thrive. In a cramped and noisy place like this, how could it exist? Lily was now 15. She had grown into a beautiful young woman, with long black hair and her mother's large, deep eyes, but with her father's reserved, distant demeanor. She was a good student, caused no trouble, but also had no close friends. Lily was like a small island, quietly existing in the bustling ocean of high school students. She spent most of her time in her small room, drawing and listening to music. Her memory of Serene Haven village and Anine had been completely erased, as a self-preservation mechanism of her brain. Victor and Mary had also changed. Victor has no longer written novel. The horror in Serene Haven had killed all his literary inspiration. He is now working as a tedious desk job at an insurance company, a job that provided stability but drained his soul every day. Mary had returned to painting, but her paintings, though colorful, always had an indescribable sadness. The scar on her forehead had faded, now just a thin line, hidden beneath her hair. They were a couple who had walked through hell together, and though still together, there was always an invisible distance between them, a silence about the forbidden topic. They were survivors, but also sentinels. They never spoke of it, but both were silently guarding their daughter, watching for an enemy they hoped would never return. The relapse began slowly, almost imperceptibly. It started with Lily's drawings. She still drew, but the themes had changed. Instead of cityscapes or flowers, Lily began drawing bizarre images. Forests with twisted tree trunks like pained bodies. Faceless children. And sometimes, she drew herself, but always with a small, dark shadow clinging to her back like a tumor. When Mary accidentally saw the drawings, her heart skipped a beat. They were too similar to Lily's crude drawings from 8 years ago. She asked her daughter, but Lily just irritably snatched back her sketchbook. "It's just an image, Mom. You always meddle in my business." Then came the strange phenomena in the apartment. A desk lamp in Lily's room suddenly flickered even though the bulb had just been replaced. A few books on the shelf fell by themselves in the middle of the night. Victor tried to find reasonable explanations: old apartment wiring, building vibrations. But deep down, the tumor of memory began to ache. The real nightmare returned one July night, a typical stifling city night. Victor was working late in the living room when he heard a loud thud from Lily's room, followed by the girl's angry scream. He and Mary rushed over. Lily's door flew open. The room was in chaos. The desk chair was overturned. Paint splattered on the walls. Lily stood in the middle of the room, panting, her eyes blazing with anger. "What happened, honey?" Mary asked, panicked. "It won't listen to me," Lily screamed, pointing to an empty corner of the room. "I told it to be quiet." Victor and Mary looked at each other, a familiar, chilling fear running down their spines. There was no one else in the room. From that day on, the evil no longer hid. It began to spread outwards. At school, Lily became increasingly isolated. Occasionally, classmates sitting next to her would startle as they heard whispers in their ears, or felt a cold current of air brush the back of their necks even with the windows closed. They began to shun her, calling her Weird Lily. Only one person didn't do that. His name was Sam. Sam was a quiet, intelligent, and somewhat curious boy. He was drawn to Lily's sad and mysterious beauty. He decided to try to be her friend. One afternoon, after school, Sam struck up a conversation with Lily as she was packing her books. "Hi Lily," he said, smiling kindly. "Your art class drawings are really good." Lily looked up, a little surprised. She just nodded. "I'm Sam. I sit in the desk in front of you. Do you want to go get some sweet soup?" Lily hesitated. For a moment, one could see a soft, longing desire for connection in her eyes. But then, a coldness swept through. Her eyes became distant. She tilted her head slightly, a hauntingly familiar gesture that Victor and Mary hadn't seen in 8 years. "Go on," a whispered voice came from Lily's mouth, but the tone was high-pitched like a child's. "Play with him. I want to have fun about it." Sam didn't hear the change in her voice. He just saw Lily nod in agreement and visibly brighten. But on the way to the sweet soup shop, tragedy struck. As they were crossing the street at a busy intersection, Sam suddenly froze in the middle of the road, his eyes wide with horror. "Sam! Watch out!" Lily screamed, her voice returning to normal. A truck was speeding towards them. Sam stood rooted to the spot, as if held by an invisible force. He just stammered, Someone's pulling my leg." At the last second, Lily lunged forward, pushing Sam hard onto the sidewalk. The truck shrieked terrifyingly and sped past, missing them by inches. People rushed over. Sam sat on the ground, his face drained of color, trembling uncontrollably. He wasn't hurt, but he had seen it. For a moment, he had seen a tiny black shadow, the shape of a child, clinging to Lily's back, its bony hands reaching towards him. The incident at school couldn't be ignored. Lily was required to see the school psychologist, Mr. Pitch, who was a middle-aged man, kind and patient. He believed that all adolescent problems stemmed from family trauma or living environment. He began therapy sessions with Lily, trying to understand her inner world. In the early sessions, Lily spoke very little. But Mr. Pitch persisted. He gave her paper and colored pencils, encouraging her to draw what she couldn't say. And Lily drew again. Forests, faceless children, and the ever-present black shadow. "Who is this shadow, Lily?" Mr. Pitch gently asked. Lily stared at the drawing. "It's my friend," she whispered. "She's been with me for a long time." "What's her name?" "She doesn't have a name. She's just a lost child." Mr. Pitch took notes. He believed lost child was a persona Lily created to cope with some past psychological trauma that her family had kept hidden. He decided to record the therapy sessions, hoping to analyze them more deeply. And that's when he crossed the line of science. When he listened back to the tapes in his quiet office, Mr. Pitch began to notice anomalies. Interspersed with his voice and Lily's, there were whispers. Very faint, but clear when the volume was turned up to maximum. "Get out," a child's voice hissed. "She's mine." Another time, when he was asking Lily about her family, the tape recorded a moment of silence, then a chilling giggle, followed by a clear phrase in an ancient language he couldn't understand. Mr. Pitch, a man of logic, began to feel frightened. He searched online for lost child and electronic voice phenomena, EVP. What he read made him rethink everything he had ever believed. The lost child inside Lily seemed to sense Mr. Pitch's suspicion and decided to act. It wanted to possess Lily completely. It wanted a life, friends, experiences. And Sam was the perfect target. One evening, Sam received a text message from Lily's number, "Meet me on the rooftop of the old apartment building across from school." Something I want to tell you. Sam, though still scared after the accident, allowed his concern for Lily to prevail. He went to the meeting place. The rooftop was deserted, the wind howling. Lily was standing at the edge of the rooftop, her back to him. "Lily?" Sam called. Lily slowly turned. Her eyes were pitch black. The smile on her lips wasn't Lily's. "You're here." The child's voice echoed. "I've been waiting for you. Want to play a game? This game is fun. It's called flying." Before Sam could react, an extremely strong force pushed him towards the railing. He staggered, half his body already over the edge. He clung tightly to the railing, screaming in despair. "Lily! Don't! I'm not Lily!" It screamed, raising its foot to kick Sam's hand. Just then, Victor, Lily's father, and Mr. Pitch stormed onto the rooftop. Mr. Peterson, after listening to the latest audio recording with clear threats aimed at Sam, had frantically called Lily's parents. They had arrived just in time. Victor lunged forward, pulling Sam back to safety. Mr. Pitch confronted Lily. "Leave her alone," he shouted. The entity in Lily burst out laughing. "You can't do anything to me. 8 years ago you have failed. We are together now. Unless you kill her," it said, then made Lily faint. They brought Lily home. The battle had reached its end. Victor, Mary, and Mr. Pitch sat in the living room, the air heavy as lead. Science had failed. Ancient dark magic had also failed. What are they going to do? "It's no longer an external entity," Mr. Pitch said, his voice strained. "After 8 years, it has deeply embedded itself in Lily's psyche. It latched onto her through trauma and loneliness. We can't exorcise it with spells. We have to heal Lily from within. We have to show it that Lily is no longer lonely. That she is loved. We have to perform a psychological exorcism." The plan was laid out. It was a dangerous gamble. They would put Lily into a deep hypnotic state, creating a spiritual space for Lily to confront the lost child directly. Victor and Mary would be the guides, conveying love and strength to their daughter. Sam, after calming down, also agreed to participate. His presence, a true friend, might be the key. The confrontation took place in the apartment's living room. Lily sat in an armchair, slowly sinking into a hypnotic state under Mr. Pitch's guidance. Victor, Mary, and Sam sat around, holding hands. "Lily, where are you?" Mr. Pitch asked. In a forest, Lily's voice echoed, distant. "Dark and cold. I'm walking alone." "You're not alone," Mary said, her voice trembling but firm. "Mommy's here with you." "Dad's here too," Victor added. "I'll never abandon you again." "Me too," Sam said softly. "I'm here." In Lily's mind, the scene began to change. The gloomy forest was gradually replaced by the family's living room. But in the middle of the room, a thin, pale child with pitch-black eyes full of hatred stood there. That was the true form of the lost child. Lily was standing opposite it. "Get out!" The lost child screamed, its voice echoing in Lily's mind. They're mine. You're mine too. You need me not to be alone. In reality, the apartment began to shake. Lights flickered frantically. Furniture floated. A freezing wind howled through the room. The lost child was using all its strength to resist. No, Lily said in her mind, her voice sounding strong and confident for the first time. I don't need you anymore. You're lying. You're lonely. You're always lonely. I used to, Lily replied, and she saw the images of her father, mother, and Sam standing behind her, enveloping her in a warm light. But not anymore. I have a family. I have friends. They love me. And you only have hatred. You got no one. Those words were like a fatal blow to the lost child. It was an entity that lived on the loneliness and suffering of others. When the host no longer felt those things, it lost its source of energy. It let out one last scream, a scream full of pain and shattering. No. In the room, a pitch-black shadow was violently expelled from Lily's body. It curled into a distorted child's form in the middle of the room for a second, then vanished into thin air like smoke blown away by the wind. Everything returned to normal. Furniture fell to the floor. The wind stopped blowing. Lily slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were clear, without a trace of gloom. She looked at her father, her mother, then at Sam. And for the first time in many years, she smiled. A genuine smile. They had won. Life had returned to peace. Wounds had become scars. Everything seemed to have returned to its proper orbit. One evening, Mary went into Lily's room to wish her good night. The girl was fast asleep, her cheeks flushed. Mary smiled, gently pulling the blanket back over her. As she was about to turn away, she heard Lily mumble softly. "Where did you go?" The girl's voice was tiny, sleepy. "Play with me, friend." Mary's heart fluttered slightly, but she quickly reassured herself. The girl was probably just dreaming of a friend from school. She leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead, then quietly turned and walked out, closing the door. The light from the hallway shone into the room, casting Mary's shadow onto the opposite wall. A tall, gentle shadow of a mother. And for a moment, just a moment, before Mary fully closed the door. Beside her shadow, a tiny, low shadow, shaped like a child, appeared out of nowhere. It stood there, silently, looking up at Mary's shadow. Then the door closed, and the room was plunged into darkness. Their battle had ended. But somewhere out there, in a city of millions filled with lonely souls, another nightmare may have just begun. Thank you for your attention and for listening to the channel story. Please support the channel by liking the video if you found it enjoyable, commenting your thoughts on the story and its ending, sharing this video with friends and family, subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss the next exciting horror stories. Thank you for watching, everyone.